Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today, Bridging the Gap, How Data Can Align Providers and Funders to Drive Impact. Before we get started with our featured guests, I'd like to take you through a couple of housekeeping items. The first is that we'll have a time at the end of the presentation for questions. Feel free to send us a chat throughout the presentation if a question comes to mind, and we'll revisit all of those at the end following the presentation. The second is that we are recording this webinar, and we're happy to share that with you following the presentation today. Please feel free to share that with your colleagues or use as a reference for yourself going forward. So with that, I'm very pleased to introduce our featured guests. I should say I'm Maureen Coleman. I'm the Director of Marketing at UpMetrics. And I'm happy to introduce Stephen Minix, the Director of K-12 Solutions here at UpMetrics, and he'll take us through our featured guests and agenda and get started.
Forgive me, folks. I had to find the unmute button. Not a good start, but we'll get rolling. Good morning, folks. Good afternoon, wherever you're chiming in from. As Mo said, my name is Stephen Minix, and I'm the Director of K-12 Solutions for UpMetrics. As a former coach, athletic director, administrator, district admin over athletic and after-school programs, I have a unique perspective in this space, and I'm happy to share a little bit about that through my lens as well as through the lens of our partners. Laureus Sport for Good, represented by Julia Lankford, the programs officer, as well as Marvin Hightower, the executive director of the First Tee of Atlanta. You guys did not come here to listen to me. You guys came to learn a little bit about their work. So I'm going to push through and get to the real meat and potatoes of this conversation. But before we do, I want to frame a little bit of this conversation. In my previous role, running after-school programs at Green Dot, I was unlucky enough to take an $8 million grant hit in 1 year, wiping out our funding for all of our high school after-school programs that were funded through 21st Century Funding. The long and short of it is we lost out because we did not have an effective data strategy, and me as the director of that department, that falls directly in my lap. That said, I've committed my life to now supporting other organizations not have to take those same pitfalls in their journey to offer high-quality youth development programs for kids. Next slide, please. So the challenge. We have a real challenge ahead of us. Socioeconomic status continues to drive educational and health outcome inequality. Realizing that we are preaching to the choir on this call today or this webinar, I just think these 5 statistics will likely resonate with you and help address the overall theme that data can align funding with programs. If you do not have data to combat these kinds of issues, you will continue to lose out on your pursuit to fund your program, as well as proliferate high-quality opportunities for kids. Next slide. So at UpMetrics, our theory of change is simple. Participation, high-quality, interest-based activities leads to positive outcomes that can drive systematic change. And we realize collectively that everyone here believes that providing the programming they do leads to positive outcomes in the communities you work with. Some of these may include academic progress, health improvement, BMI, mental health, financial advances, family connectivity. The options are endless. But until you intentionally look at your program and its goals and the possible outcomes, you're always probably going to fall victim of just the low-hanging fruit. And it's time to push past that with collective impact. Next slide. So some of the challenges for impact organizations offering this work are associated with measuring and communicating the impact of access to these programs. If you use data to inform some of this opportunity, what you will see is whether through academic performance, SEL as mentioned, ROI from the foundation side, there's an opportunity to truly dig in and offer high-level analysis that can speak to the impact of your programs. Currently, people tend to track what they think they should track. But what happens if there's other information they're not even considering? without partnering with collaborative organizations to have those conversations, you'll never really understand. Next slide. So at UpActive and UpMetrics, we think there's a couple ways to do it. There's a couple solutions that we offer. One being mobile purpose-built technology at the frontline staff, so they can actually collect, manage schedules, register, etc., so that they can actually operate more effectively. That leading into UpMetrics, which is the data visualization and analytics for the admin, so they can actually understand data in a live fashion. Far too often in a lot of these programs, what happens is folks tend to only look at data in kind of a finish line theory at the end of a semester or at the end of the year in line with when they have to report. But if you're only collecting data to report, you're missing out on a huge opportunity to inform the operations and better design programs for the kids and stakeholders that you are serving. Next slide. So how can data drive impact? We all know some of this, but it's always good to revisit. On the provider side, helping build staff capacity, helping inform decision-making, increasing opportunities to access to funding, improving program quality, and increasing coach accountability. On the foundation side, there's some similarities, but better equipped to identify quality programs, can help inform their investment decision, help validate investment previously made, as well as increasing access to funding. At the end of the day, with appropriate data, the conversation between providers and funders is streamlined. So currently, with the west side of Atlanta and the collective project we'll talk about here in a moment, we are looking at supporting Laureus Sport for Good with their grantee portfolio, one of which is First the Tee. A collective report is being authored as we speak. It's not complete at this time because of releasing of academic data that we'll talk about in a moment. So we wanted to highlight a project that we've done already with Just Keep Living Foundation and Green Dot Public Schools out here in Los Angeles. Just to frame it, Just Keep Living Foundation is Matthew McConaughey's foundation focused on fitness and gratitude. In this simple slide, which is one of quite a few in this project, they're looking at participation in their program, specifically dosage related to academic outcomes. Oftentimes in these programs, providers feel kind of stuck in a rock and a hard place in the sense that if a kid comes to their program one time and doesn't get the true value of their program, should their data impact the outcomes of the total? This, we've differentiated between regular attendees or people attending the program more than 66% of the time. And if you look at the outcome of kids participating in this program, 3.5 GPA for kids that came more than 66% of the events. We don't ever hint at talking causation, we look at correlation. And the correlation between participating in this program and some GPA outcomes is tough to deny. So perhaps there's something there we can continue to look at. And that's, to me, a big part of this data-driven approach. Next slide. So, as I realize you all came here to listen to actually Laureus and First the Tee talk, I want to frame a little bit about the conversation. Again, we are supporting their collective efforts in providing high-quality sport-based youth development programs in their west side of Atlanta. I'm happy to introduce Julia Lankford again and allow her to take the mic and explain more detailed how Laureus approaches this work. Thank you for your time, folks.
All righty, thank you, Stephen. It is with great pleasure to be here to talk about how Laureus Sport for Good Foundation USA utilize data to reach the impact and so forth to get to the level that we would want to achieve with our pillars. So when we look at this first slide, you can see that with Laureus, we have grantees that use the power of sport to make change in the community in key areas of education, health and wellness, income, and community cohesion. So when we launched this work, we had 14 grantees. By the end of the first year, we had a little over of 11,500 participants. The really reason why I want to talk about that is that's key. That's overall in our target area, which is West Side that you heard Stephen mention, which is a community that's made up of English Avenue, Vine City, and Washington Park. But it also includes the broader metro Atlanta area, which is why it was so important for us to work with an organization like UpMetrics, because it really did help our organizations break down their number of participants based off area and so forth. Next slide. So what does impact mean for Laureus? So you just heard me say we have our key pillars of education, health and wellness, income, and community cohesion. But when we looked at it from a different scale and working with our organizations, we really did want to look at academic performance, social and emotional learning, and health and fitness. And we've been able to use the database and UpActive with our grantees to look at how we monitor these things of different tests and surveys that we provide via HIA and some other things. I think what's really key that we look at with our fourth component, our fourth and fifth component of community cohesion and income, is that it allowed the organizations to be creative in the process of how we look at outcomes, but more importantly, how we look at the impact that these various programs are making in the community. So we really did want to measure who was participating in the programs versus who wasn't, and what that data looks like. Next slide. So our approach to data was really intentional. I don't want to mislead anyone to think this is an easy process. It was very much a learning process, but one thing that Laureus USA really prides themselves on is that we try to learn in public. And so when we did this learning in public and shared learning with our grantees, we were able to really monitor and track what are some of these lessons learned to help in other cities. So our founding sponsor behind this work is Mercedes-Benz USA. And so we worked with them of talking about how do we really want to look at how Atlanta is making this impact. And so the key thing that we had to really start with is really lining up that partnership and getting that memorandum of understanding with Atlanta Public Schools. That was the first step. That don't mean it happened first. But then we did really the onboarding process with the 14 grantees. And this was really key because this process had us have the opportunity not only to sit down with the grantees and the team with UpMetrics, i.e. Stephen and Daryl, to really have a personal relationship with some of the organizations of how they utilize data, how they wanted to utilize data, what was the systems they was using to track participation and attendance. So we really could try to build the dashboard that was beneficial for both the organization, the grantee, as well as Laureus USA. We also looked at how do we deliver this impact with report. So again, as Stephen mentioned, we're not at the report stage yet, but we already have those relationships and organizations like the Boys and Girls Clubs and other organizations that are waiting to get this report because they want this shared learning. And I will leave with that, you know, as you launch into how you make data work for your organization, is really looking at collaboration, and not just collaboration with the funder, but also collaboration with, you know, your grantees and the community, because all of that plays a role in how you receive that data. Next slide. This gives you an example, if you look at this slide, of some of the organizations that Laureus USA was funding in Atlanta, which range from running, when you see Atlanta Track Club and Girls on the Run, to soccer programs like Soccer in the Streets and First Word Soccer, you know, tennis, lacrosse, baseball. It was a wide range, with a lot of organizations having different needs and wants of what they wanted to achieve from their program. And so having the process of really shared learning and that onboarding process, we were able to sit down with the organizations to figure out what they wanted to achieve and then what we could help them achieve from an academic standpoint. In this ecosystem in action, you know, we want to be transparent and honest that it didn't start as quickly as we would have liked. It took us, halfway through to get the MOU and everything and sign off everything from Atlanta Public Schools to then get the waivers and all that information to our grantees. So you have to be willing to have that process of when you're doing something new that you got to get the kinks out of it a little bit. But we're at a positive space now where we know we can have this academic information for not only 2018, but FY 2019 school year as well. So this is giving you an example of that kind of working plan of, we introduced the UpMetrics team to the grantees. This was a in-depth 2-day process that I'm sure first team, Mr. Marvin Hightower, will give more in-depth, but we spent 2 full days with all the organizations where they had really the time to ask any questions of not only myself, but my staff person for loan, as well as Stephen and Daryl, to really get to what we wanted to achieve, but more importantly, to get to the why. Because I think when we look at data, we have to understand why we want this information. So we created this co-plan with the grantees and the foundation that we all agreed upon. And then we have this ongoing support that the grantees doesn't necessarily have to work with Laureus USA. They can work directly with UpMetrics to get their information and get feedback. I think this is really key of having great relationships with your organizations. Through this process, myself and Mr. Hightower talked a lot in regards to how we wanted to share the information with other organizations. We talk constantly with UpMetrics of how do we get this information, what's the timeline looking like. So with this continuous collaboration, I can't really speak on this enough, is that you really have to have that constant communication to ensure every party gets what they need out of the situation. Next slide. So from this point, then you have Mr. Hightower that can speak more to from First T of Atlanta of how we really work together in that collaboration effort to get things going.
Great. Hey, thank you, Julia, very much. I appreciate it. Also, I do want to, before I get into the content here, thank Julia and also Stephen for the partnership. You'll probably hear me reference that quite a bit during my remarks, but we do have a true partnership that I think will become even more evident as I go through my content. For those of you who may not be familiar with the First T, let me give you a little background, and I give you some specific background about the First T of Atlanta, because I think it will help set the context for the rest of what I'd like to share with you today. And thank each and every one of you on the webinar for being here. I believe this is going to be a very impactful learning opportunity for you. The First T, if you're not familiar with it, was founded as a national organization in 1997. Our founding partners were the Ladies Professional Golf Association, the Masters Tournament out of Augusta, PGA of America, the PGA Tour, and the United States Golf Association. Nationally, the First T has served over 15 million young people. And as far as the First T of Atlanta is concerned, and that's the organization or the chapter that I'm very blessed and privileged to be the executive director of, we were licensed and we began programming in 1999, so almost 20 years ago. We are one of 150 chapters of the First T nationwide, and we deliver youth development curriculum and life skills through 3 program channels. We do programming at golf course program locations in Atlanta, 6 of those specifically, where we served over 1,033 young people as of year-end 2017, and we're trending to be along that same number for 2018. In terms of the outreach program, and this is the space where I've had the great opportunity to meet Julia and Stephen, but through our outreach programming that we have used to reach over 102,000 kids in the metro Atlanta area. We do outreach programming through various school systems, 6 school district partners, as a matter of fact, in the Atlanta area. And we also have an after-school program called the Drive program. And this is the area where we were very fortunate to receive funding from the Laureus Foundation because through the funding that they have given us, we were able to support programming at 2 Boys and Girls Clubs on the west side of Atlanta, Bellwood Boys and Girls Club and Woolfolk Boys and Girls Clubs, if any of you on the webinar are familiar with the Atlanta metro area. Next slide, please. Right, thank you. Like any nonprofit, anyone who depends upon donors and contributors to make your engines go, we are always very cognizant of how we are treating our donors. But more specifically, we pledge to our donors that we will do everything possible to maximize the impact of their contributions. So we make sure we manifest that by providing a return that is reflected in the positive impact that we have on the kids in our program. So we want to make sure our donors see that. We also assure them through our pledge that we will make every spending decision, every investment decision, looking through the lens of how it positively impacts those kids. So with that as our pledge, what this slide shows you that you're looking at now are the must-have attributes that any technology we embrace must possess as we seek to improve the effectiveness and the impact of our overall operations. I believe, as you can see there, most of those factors will speak for themselves. However, I do want to take a very quick moment to address easy to use and also staff empowerment. And I'll also say something very briefly about the stakeholder comment at the bottom of the slide. One of the things that is very, very important, especially in my organization, and I don't believe I'm alone in this, is that you have staff and you have volunteers whose age range varies, right? In my particular organization, we have staff and volunteers who range from millennials all the way to late baby boomers like myself. And because of that, you have staff members and volunteers who are at different levels when it comes to the technology adoption curve and their comfort with technology. So therefore, the way that we look at it is that we want to make sure that any technology, any applications that we embrace are easy to use, because we know at the end of the day, it's going to make it easier for all of our staff members, regardless of where they are on the millennial to baby boomer curve, where they are, that they're going to embrace it more, they're going to use it more effectively, and they won't be intimidated by it at all. And again, what that leads to at the end of the day is greater empowerment of our staff and volunteers, and therefore we can better serve our participants and all of our key stakeholders. And speaking of stakeholders, there are various stakeholders who contribute to our program success and growth. I could give you a long list of them, but they, of course, obviously include our donors, such as the great people at Laureus, represented here by Julia, our board of directors. We also have a degree of accountability to the city of Atlanta here from a governmental perspective. I mentioned our outreach partners as well. And of course, it goes without saying that the young people in our program and the parents of these young people are key stakeholders for us. As a matter of fact, I put them kind of at the top of the pyramid. So it's very important that any technology that we embrace enables us to interface and work with these stakeholder communities in a manner that they, and I would bold the word they and underline the word they, that it's very important that any technology we embrace is done so in a manner that they, as our key stakeholders, view it as effective and very beneficial to them. Next slide, please. So where are we with UpMetrics and UpActive at this point? Basically, and Julia alluded to this, but we are using UpActive right now to record and track program attendance at the 2 Boys and Girls Clubs that we have programs planted in here in Atlanta on the west side. And again, specifically, those are our Bellwood Boys and Girls Club and the Woolfolk Boys and Girls Club. Just to give you a little more context there, the Bellwood Boys and Girls Club is a unit of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro Atlanta, and the Woolfolk Boys and Girls Club is a unit of the Salvation Army Boys and Girls Club here in Atlanta. To date, I'm very pleased to tell you that our experience with the UpActive application has met key must-have criteria that were just shown on the previous slide. And I'll specifically point out 2, because these 2 have been very important to us as we began to learn and get accustomed to the application and get it rolling here as part of our data collection efforts. Flexibility, again, is a key consideration. Julia, and I will underscore what she said, she and the Laureus organization, and by extension, UpMetrics, have been very flexible and have been great partners in this ecosystem because, quite frankly, when we first received our funding from Laureus, we encountered some unforeseen difficulties getting our programs launched. There were a lot of unforeseen obstacles and some issues that we had to overcome before we could get up and running as fast as we wanted to. And because of those items that we had to address, the flexibility and the partnership and the ability for the active application, and again, Stephen and his team's flexibility in working with us was mission critical to us being where we are right now. The other thing I want to mention is just the fact that the mobility benefit and the ease of use that also appeared on the previous slide was important. We did wind up placing in the Two Boys and Girls Clubs our own staff on site. That was a completely different model than we normally have for that type of programming that we're doing there. But the mobility benefit and the ease of use of the application were critical to us getting our coaches that we placed there up to speed and running with the program. The things I want to mention right now in terms of what we're doing now, what we're focused on now in terms of the active application is that I'm working with my outreach coordinator. She directs our outreach efforts, and we're very focused right now on ensuring we fully utilize the data capture capabilities of the UpActive platform. There's a lot there that we still have not fully leveraged, and we do plan to do that. So we're working with our on-site coaches to ensure that we have fidelity in everything we're doing with that application. We're also trying to determine how we can more effectively use the messaging and the notification aspects and the video storage capabilities of the UpActive app, as well as how we can more effectively leverage the UpActive analytics dashboard. We're very positive and very confident that we're going to take our use of that to another level. We're also going to be a little bit later this year, begin focusing on how we can more effectively leverage the UpMetrics analytics and their data reporting. We want to make sure that we do so in such a manner that it enables us to complement what we're already doing through our standard first piece surveying and other data collection and measurement, evaluation, and learning approaches. So we're also going to be looking at that as we go forward. And also just a very quick note on Salesforce before we go to the next slide, because you can see the comment there. Nationally, the first T is implementing Salesforce to support program delivery, program tracking, chapter operations, and just our overall methodology for interfacing with key stakeholders. We here at Atlanta, at my chapter, we're going to be migrating to the Salesforce Phase 1 that we have teed up beginning in Q4 of this year. And we will be evaluating how to best integrate the data captured from UpActive with the Salesforce application. We're very confident we're going to be able to do this and maximize the benefit of both platforms. Next slide, please. So how do we get started? Again, not to be redundant, but you did hear Julia speak to the great start I think we had. When I say great, there was a lot of learning along the way. Back in August of 17, we received a meeting invite from Julia and her team to attend a meeting with Steve and one of his associates, Darryl Stewart. I, along with my program director, attended this meeting where we learned a lot more about UpMetrics, company's background, who these gentlemen were, and basically the technical capabilities that UpMetrics had today and what they were focused on doing in the future. I do believe that it established a very good foundation for the ongoing working relationship that we have right now. And I do believe that Stephen used the term ecosystem earlier, and I think that's very apropos in this regard. This spirit of partnership, again, was very important due to the fact that our program startup was not as smooth as I referenced before as we would have liked for it to be. But again, the ecosystem and the willingness of both Laureus as well as UpMetrics to work with us was mission critical to make sure that we're positioned now to get the outcome for our youth participants that we promised to Laureus that we would achieve on the west side of Atlanta. So those things were very, very important. So we got that basic training. Darryl Stewart, again, on Stephen's staff, has been there continuously to support us with anything we need with the active application. He was also very critical on the front end of our use of the app, helping us with attendance rosters and getting auto notifications set up and all of that. And also when we began to train our coaches that we placed on site at those boys and girls clubs, again, the support of UpMetrics and Laureus' understanding in that regard was also critical to our success. Next slide, please. So in terms of initial successes and next steps, I'm not going to read through each one of those bullets. I would just provide some general commentary as you review those 5 bullet points. I would say that we are very pleased here at the First Tee of Atlanta with the partnership that has been established with UpMetrics and the steps that we have taken to assist our ongoing and previously existing data collection efforts. We view it as a good start, but we very, very much realize that much more can be accomplished. We look forward to further leveraging the active application as I referenced before. We also look forward to leveraging UpMetrics data compilation and reporting capabilities as well, but doing so again in a manner that complements our national migration as an organization to Salesforce, as well as in a manner that complements our SurveyMonkey and other types of survey methodologies and data capture and reporting methodologies that we already have in place. Julia, I think, mentioned this as well. We also look very much forward to working with Laureus and UpMetrics on getting and accessing data from the Atlanta public school systems here. We've been partnering to try to secure consent forms from parents that will allow us to access that data. And each and every one of you in this webinar, I know you can all readily see how important, how impactful it will be for us to be able to assess the linkage between the participation results that we see from youth in our development program and how that may translate into positive impacts on student performance in the classroom and beyond. So that's where we are from the First Tee of Atlanta's perspective. I want to just thank UpMetrics for the opportunity to be on this webinar, and I'll turn it over to the next presenter.
Great, Julia, why don't you give us an overview of kind of initial success and next steps on the Laureus side, and then we'll get to questions. Thanks so much, Marvin.
Thank you, Maureen, and again, thank you, Marvin. I think one of the key things that I do want to highlight as a success, I don't know how many have worked with school systems and so forth, but the initial success is just having the execution of the data agreement MOU with the Atlanta Public Schools. 2, all organizations are at different levels, so having everyone successfully onboarded onto the system where they're able to really track attendance and those other things have been very beneficial. And I really think that the dashboards has been very helpful, not only for Laureus, but really for the organizations to get a broad view of what impact their program is making in the city of Atlanta. And the reason why those things are important for us, and I don't want to speak for UpMetrics, but I will share with this, is that, this was a start of, I feel like a fruitful relationship, a friendship, but more so of really trying to get a dialogue of how can we really measure the impact that Laureus wanted to see through the power of sports with our grantees that we fund. And, with Laureus, we're in several cities, so Atlanta was the pilot. And so it's been successful for us to look at and learning in public of what the steps are in Atlanta for when we get ready to go to the next city with UpMetrics or, so forth. We already have those lessons learned where we can achieve those goals in that timeline that we established from the beginning.
Great, thanks so much, Julia, and thanks everyone for hanging with us here. This is a compelling story, and I'm glad we got to hear from both Marvin and Julia. We have time for questions now. Before we do that, I do want to let everyone know Julia and her team have graciously offered to, in a couple of months, once we have final impact data to share. We'll be able to circle back with each of you and sort of close the loop to tell this complete story. So thank you to Laureus of Atlanta for agreeing to that. And so you all can look forward to hearing sort of the great impact happening not only at First Day of Atlanta, but across Laureus Atlanta grantees. So with that, I want to dive into some questions. First, this is a question for Marvin from Lena. Marvin, Lena is asking, how did you select the 5 tech requirements for your organization, and why is mobile first one of your top priorities?
I'm sorry, Mo, you cut out on me just a little bit there. Can you please repeat the question for me?
My pleasure. The question is from Lena, and she asks, how did you select the 5 tech requirements, and why is mobile first one of the top priorities?
Well, let me start with the last one first. In terms of mobile first, I think we all can agree that when you look at the proliferation of mobile technology in terms of cell phones and the like, iPads, you name it, that our ability to be able to commute remotely where we are is mission critical. For us at the First City of Atlanta, we do a lot of programming, say, on the golf course. We do a lot of programming in areas where you don't necessarily have ready access to a desktop computer or any types of other communications that would be desktop based. So as we move coaches around from different points in the metro area to work at different golf courses, as we move coaches to work at different sites, say within the Boys and Girls Club, our ability to be able to collect data there on site in terms of attendance and who's there, in terms of coaches being able to take notes real time, who's there, in terms of our coaches being able to maybe even capture pictures and post those up in terms of real world activity, so we can show to Laureus and other donors the impact in our program and operations was critical. So that's why mobile was very, very important to us. In terms of just those other criteria, again, a lot of what we see there is based upon what our home office, which is based in St. Augustine, is setting the template for in terms of technology for the First T chapters. But I would hasten to add that I believe you could take those for almost any nonprofit and they would apply and serve you very well. Hopefully that answers the question. If not, I'd be more than happy to take another shot at it or take a question offline.
Great. Thanks so much, Marvin. So our next question comes from Esther. She asks, what are tools or resources that you provide to grantees to help standardize data collection and reporting? Sounds like maybe we can start with Stephen, and then if Julia or Marvin want to chime in here, we'll open up the mic.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Esther. Yeah, I mean, a big part of data collection is streamlining and kind of honing in on what's consistent. We provide templates that speak exactly to our system. So the goal isn't to have people have to kind of reinvent the wheel, but if we give them simple uploader sheets that can allow them to take data they've already collected in a variety of fashions. I see a couple questions about Salesforce or Google Charts or whatever database is already being used. A lot of that information can be pulled and put onto simple templates that we provide that inform the uploading and building of platforms. So yes, it can be done.
Thanks, Stephen. So we have some questions around fees for UpActive and UpMetrics. So that sounds like another question for Stephen. What's the fee associated with using both, and how many users can it support?
Sure. We have some partners that are looking at potentially 1 million participants. So if that gets to the capacity of what we can do, and that's kind of an endless opportunity. When it comes to fees, as with anything, it's based on amount of organizations involved. Some of the organizations we work with have hundreds of groups. It's layered. I'll just be very candid. We have contracts right now from $500 up to $75,000. I think the only way to have these conversations is black coffee and be straight. But what we would do with anybody is have co-created strategies that fit what you're looking to do, as well as what our price points where we need to be at. But the goal for this whole program was to provide a subsidized offering so organizations can pallet it. we realize that pricing people out of the room isn't smart, and that's the absolute way we approach it.
Thanks, Stephen. So we have a number of additional questions here listed. I want to be sensitive to people's time, so what I'm going to suggest is that our team will follow up individually with everyone who sent a question. We have a number of kind of specific use cases, and so we're happy to talk through those with each of you. I want to thank everyone for being here today. I especially want to thank our featured guests and partners, Julia and Marvin. We appreciate you making the time to be here and share your insights and learnings with all of us. And to everyone on the call, thank you for making the time. As I've mentioned before, we will make this recording available. Please feel free to share with your colleagues. And like I mentioned at the end of the presentation, we're happy to touch base in a couple of months with some impact data to really complete this story. So thanks again to everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all. Have a nice afternoon.